And then there's an eye, and going out from this eye are these broadcast transmissions. And that hit me so powerfully. Neil Haigh was with me, and we kind of looked at each other and said, that's Saturn, isn't it? And remember, physicists have said only this last few days, they may have evidence the universe is a computer simulation. Well, I say that it's a virtual reality, which has been hacked into, and that hack is the reality that we're experiencing, the fake reality. And that hack, I say, comes from Saturn. Because I'm saying that these rings are actually a massive broadcast transmission system which is broadcasting a fake reality within the frequency range that we are decoding, and therefore we are picking up that fake reality. When the Cassini spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004, found many things that was unexplainable. You know, things like the hexagon North Pole storm and stuff like that. But they also found extraordinarily powerful sound coming from Saturn. This is part of what they recorded. Nice, man. And I got sent this by a sound engineer, works in sound engineering for a living, and it's one of the rings of Saturn, and he said, I see that every day. That's bloody sound. They're sound waves. And this is in cymatics. This is a six-pointed star. And of course we have the hexagon going round and round and round at Saturn's North Pole. This is a standing wave created by sound, rings. This is at the south pole of Saturn, and it's a permanent ice storm. This is a standing wave created by sound. And these are symbols created by sound, like cymatics. And a certain frequency created this perfect six-pointed star with the hexagon in the middle and the hexagon there. Therefore, the sound creates the frequency, creates the symbol, and in the same way, the symbol represents the sound and the frequency. The symbols are just holographic representations of vibrational waveform states. I would suggest in these symbols cases, representatives of the sound frequency coming off Saturn. Same with all these symbols and numerological manipulations. The sound and the symbol are different expressions of the same thing. Thus, if we, in the holographic realm, are constantly bombarded with these symbols, it is on an energetic level feeding us the frequency field of what they represent. And Saturn, when described pre-cataclysmic, didn't have rings. So where'd they come from? Well, maybe it had rings, but it weren't rings we could see. We can see them now. Well, this guy, Norman Bergeron, has a long, he's in his 90s now, I think. He has a long, long history in space research, technological research, going way back. And his life changed when he started studying the pictures that came back from the Voyager 1 and 2 space expeditions to Saturn. They arrived in 1980 and 81. Because when he studied them, he realized there was something very strange about Saturn's rings. And he said this in his book, The Ringmakers of Saturn. Several years ago, a number of folks in the astrology and astronomy and physics world began theorizing that these rings had to be much younger than the universe, perhaps only about 100 million years old. But one pair of pictures shows a change in 5 minutes. An impression is conveyed that the latest reported measurements purport to be the true ones, when in reality all might quite nearly be correct at the time of observation. General reluctance to accept variable ring system geometry occurs because of apparent failure to identify a physical mechanism suitable for producing recurrent change. In other words, classic mainstream science, if we can't explain it, we'll kid ourselves it doesn't exist. And he also found these in the pictures coming back from Voyager, and the Cassini ones found them too. And he calls them electromagnetic vehicles, and they are massive. Some of them several times bigger than the Earth. But again, we need to move our sense of perception. In terms of size representation, this is the Earth against the size of Saturn. They're not talking the same perception of big in terms of outside of the Earth. And here are some of the other pictures of these electromagnetic vehicles picked up by these NASA craft. Why aren't they all in the papers being talked about? You'd think, what the hell is this? No, nothing. Thanks to Bergeron, we've seen their existence. This is the Hubble telescope that's picked one of them up. Look at the size of the bloody thing. And here's a few Cassini spacecraft pictures, still pictures put together. What the hell is that? Exactly what Bergeron was describing from Voyager. And this is the other thing. He found pictures of stuff spewing out of these electromagnetic vehicles into the rings of Saturn and bloody making them, or extending them. And what is said to be in the rings of Saturn, I guess thus that's why we can see them, is like ice and stuff. I think, and I would suggest that eventually they will realize that there is a crystal substance being put into those rings that has a dramatic impact on their ability to transmit information. In 2009, NASA released this picture, which is a ring around Saturn, which is from 3.7 million miles out to 7.4 million, and that ring could encompass 1 billion Earths. I suggest that there are rings that we can see, but there are sound rings that we can't see that are coming out across, and we're picking them up. They make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience. The Saturn matrix, as I call it, is a frequency band which we are decoding as a fake reality. And I suggest, my view, we will find that the edge of that frequency band is what we call the speed of light. And beyond it, you go out of the matrix. And when all the genetic tinkering that the ancients talked about went on, the human form was being manipulated to be tuned in to receive and transmit within the frequency band of this Saturn broadcast, and pulling people from a heart state beyond the matrix into an emotional point of interaction, massively in the matrix, was a major way of tuning us into this fake reality. We talk about people who don't think for themselves as being in the box. Maybe we ought to say that they're in the cube. And they want to shut the heart down, and they have to so many people, because it takes us beyond the bounds of time and space, beyond the matrix, because I suggest that what we call time, as we decode it, is in this matrix transmission. I'll whip through this quickly, because I've talked about this in my books at great length, and I've talked about this at Under London Talks. But I say the moon is a construct, or a part construct. This is a book called Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. It's absolutely brilliant in the way that it puts the case for the moon not being real in terms of a natural body. But interestingly, what they find in that book is the mathematics and geometry between the sun, the moon, and the earth are fantastic in terms of their synchronicity, and it does not apply in any way to the rest of the solar system. And the Gnostic writings found in Nag Hammadi in 1945, 1,600 years old or more, say that this is a separate system operating within the Archon system of the inorganic universe. They say in the book, the authors, the maths involved in the Earth-Moon-Sun system is nothing less than staggering, and that the moon has been put there with the accuracy of the proverbial Swiss watchmaker. So when viewed from the Earth, it's the size of the sun at an eclipse. The BBC did a program, Do We Really Need the Moon? And it said the moon is now in a perfect position to sustain life on Earth in its effect on the Earth, but it's just a coincidence. I think not. We only see the near side of the moon. We don't see the far side of the moon. And the authors say in that book, the moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight. The mainstream theory is that the Earth was hit by a Mars-type planet when it was forming, and a chunk came off and became the moon, called the whack theory. That didn't pan out, so they came up with a double whack theory, where it was hit by the planet, it went away and gave it another smack, and then it became the moon. Now, of course, it doesn't pan out because it's nonsense. They don't know. Why don't they just say it's not a bad thing we don't know? There's lots of things we don't know. The best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon doesn't exist, said this scientist at the Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. It's easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. And you know, I'll go through this because I don't want to run over too much time. I'll just mention a few things about the moon. These two scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences wrote a detailed article in 1970 headed, "Is the Moon the Creation of an Alien Intelligence?" And they explained in scientific terms why the moon cannot be a natural body, and in doing so explained all the anomalies that, if it is a natural body, cannot be explained. This guy, Sergeant Wolf, talked at the National Press Club a few years ago and told of his experiences on the inside at NASA, where he saw things like alien bases on the moon and stuff like that. And there's all these towers and strange phenomenon, like this blue light called blue gem or blue dome that they can't explain on the moon. And these artifacts on the moon that clearly are not natural. Look at that one. What the bloody hell is that? They can't explain them. They don't talk about them. These are pictures of what are claimed to be statues on the moon. There's so much we don't know. In symbolic terms, maybe in a bit more than that, the moon is a bit like the Death Star of this big-time insider, George Lucas, in the sense that it's actually some kind of technological construct. And it's my view, as I've said before in previous books, that what the moon is doing, in its present use anyway, is taking this Saturn broadcast and acting as an amplifier to fire it at the Earth, so we get it in massively increased power and therefore effect. It's acting a bit like a dish transmitting information which we're picking up and decoding into a fake reality. Now, 9 months after I'd written that in a book called The Human Race Get Off Your Knees, someone sent me an email from Brazil, I think it was, a lady, and said, "Have you read this book, Earth, by Barbara Marciniak? Because I've just read your book and I think you'd find it interesting." And she sent me some page numbers. Barbara Marciniak is what they call a channel. And lots of channels are not channels. They just think they are. But, you know, if you get a genuine one, then you can get out there and bring information out from other dimensions into this one. You can get some profound information that way. And she's done a lot of great stuff, Barbara Marciniak. I've met her a few times. Anyway, I hadn't read Earth. I'd read the first book that she wrote, but not Earth. Anyway, I sent for it. I went through the page numbers, and I'm like, whoa, this is 9 months after I've said this stuff in Human Race Get Off Your Knees. And this was a channeled book, and this is what was in the book. 1996, I think this came out. The moon is a very powerful electromagnetic computer. The energy from the moon has been beaming electromagnetic frequencies onto the Earth for eons now to maintain the two-stranded DNA. The moon is a satellite that was constructed. It was anchored outside Earth's atmosphere as a mediating and monitoring device, a supercomputer or eye in the sky. Earth must be owned by those who dwell there. However, it is not. You have outside gods, creator energies, who prevent you as a species from having free reign with your kundalini. That's the energy of awakening, in effect. The influence of the moon as a main satellite computer affects all of the Earth. The moon's programs have for eons been of great limitation towards human beings. There are repetitive cycles that the moon creates to which you respond. The tales about the full moon and insanity, madness,